The forest was silent except for the hum of a chainsaw. Snow fell through the mist like drifting ash coating the ground in a cold, white hush. In the clearing, an old man in an orange jacket stood trembling, breath clouding in the frozen air. Before him hung a massive, white tiger, suspended by heavy chains. From an oak tree, its paws dangled, inches above the snow, body twisting faintly with each breath. Two small cubs crouched nearby, their fur the same pale, white as their mother's, eyes wide with fear. The man's name was Walter Briggs, a retired logger who had lived alone in these Montana woods for 20 years. He'd come out that morning to cut firewood when he saw movement near the tree and then heard the low, muffled growl of pain. At first he thought it was a trapper's kill, but when he approached, he froze. A full-grown white tiger, chained to the tree like a ghost of the snow itself. Its fur was strewn with frost and blood where the metal links had cut into its skin. Someone had captured her. Walter stared at the chains, then at the cubs. They pressed against each other for warmth, mewing softly. The mother lifted her head weakly, eyes locking onto his. They weren't wild with rage as he expected. They were pleading. He lowered the chainsaw. "Easy, girl," he whispered. "I'm not here to hurt you." The tiger's chest rose and fell shallowly. Walter circled her, boots crunching in the snow. The steel chain was thick, something meant for logging equipment. Whoever did this knew exactly how strong she was. He shut off the saw and dropped his knees. "Hold on," he murmured. "Just hold on." It took nearly 20 minutes to cut through the first link. Sparks flew in the freezing air, each one hissing as it died against the snow. The tiger flinched with every sound, but she didn't strike. She only watched him, breathing slow and ragged. The cubs crept closer. One of them pawed gently at Walter's boot. He smiled faintly through the steam of his breath. "You're brave little things," he said. When the final link snapped, the great cat collapsed forward into the snow. Walter jumped back, heart hammering, but she didn't attack. She just lay there, sides heaving, her cubs pressing against her belly. Her eyes met his once more. There was no hatred there, only exhaustion and a strange, fragile trust. "You're free," he said softly. But freedom wasn't enough. The tiger was too weak to stand. Walter looked around. No sign of the poachers who'd done this. They'd left her to die. He knelt again, tugging at the heavy chains still wrapped around her neck. "I'll get you out of here," he said. He tied the loose end to his snowmobile and pulled with all the machine's strength until the last coil slid free. The tiger's breathing steadied, her body trembling as blood began to flow back into her limbs. Walter knew she couldn't survive the cold like this. He had to bring her somewhere warm. The cubs followed as he trudged through the snow, stopping every few minutes to check if the mother still breathed. By the time they reached his cabin, the sky was turning blue-gray with evening. He spread blankets by the fire, stoked the flames high, and laid the tiger on the wooden floor. The cubs curled beside her, their small bodies shaking. He poured water into a bowl, set out raw meat from his freezer. The tiger didn't eat, but her eyes tracked his movements. Walter spoke softly as if to an old friend. "You'll be all right now," he said. "I'll call for help come daylight." He stayed up all night dozing in his chair by the fire. Each time he woke, the tiger was still there, watching him. The cubs had fallen asleep, their bellies rising and falling in rhythm with their mothers. The great cat's wounds oozed slowly, but the bleeding had stopped. At dawn, he stepped outside to call the wildlife service. His hands shook as he held the phone, explaining what he'd found. You, said a white tiger, the operator repeated, disbelief in her voice. That's right. She's hurt bad, and she's got cubs. We're sending a team right away. He hung up and went back inside. The cabin smelled of smoke and snow and animal musk. The tiger's eyes followed him. Help's coming, he said quietly. An hour later, he heard the distant thump of a helicopter. The sound startled the cubs, and even the mother tried to lift her head. Walter crouched beside her, resting a hand gently on the fur between her ears. It's okay, he murmured. They're friends. When the rescue team arrived, they were astonished. You kept her alive through the night, one ranger asked. She did most of the work, Walter said with a tired smile. They tranquilized the tiger gently and loaded her onto a sled, wrapping her in heated blankets. One ranger knelt to examine the cubs. They're healthy, she protected them. Till the end. Walter watched as they lifted her into the helicopter. Just before they closed the door, the tiger's eyes opened briefly. For a heartbeat, she looked at him again, the same look she'd given him when he first started. The saw. A silent thank you. Winter turned to spring. The forest thawed. Streams ran clear again, and Walter's days returned to their quiet rhythm. He often wondered if the tiger had survived. The rescue center sent updates of mother and 2 cubs recovering well, soon to be transferred to a wildlife reserve. He smiled every time he read them. Months later, he received a letter inviting him to visit. The reserve lay deep in the northern mountains, a fenced valley of snow and pine. When he arrived, a young ranger led him to a viewing platform. There she is, the ranger said. Walter leaned on the railing. Below, in the open field, a massive white tiger prowled gracefully through the snow. Her scars had healed into faint silver lines across her neck. Her cubs, bigger now, strong and beautiful, chased each other through the drifts. As if sensing him, the mother stopped. She turned her head toward the platform, eyes glinting pale blue in the sunlight. Walter held his breath. For a long moment, she simply looked at him. Then she lifted her muzzle and released a low, deep chuff, the same soft sound he'd heard in his cabin that night. He smiled, eyes misting. Good to see you, too, girl. The cubs ran to her side, curious about the man beyond the fence. She nudged them gently, leading them back into the trees. Snowflakes spun in the air like falling stars, and soon the white of her coat vanished into the white of the forest. Walter stayed there a long time, until the cold reached his hands again. As he turned to leave, the ranger said quietly, "She hasn't made that sound for anyone else." He looked back once more toward the empty snow. Maybe she remembers, he said. Or maybe the forest does. That night, as he sat alone by his fire, Walter thought of the chains he'd cut and the eyes that had met his through the frost. He thought of how close she'd been to death, and how the sound of her cubs crying had pulled him through the trees. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, silent, endless. He smiled to himself and whispered into the flames, "Sleep well, White Queen." Somewhere deep in the forest, a tiger's low chuff echoed faintly through the cold. And for the first time that winter, Walter Briggs felt the woods were not empty